stuck in the band. Stuck in the band. Stuck in the band. All right, here we are. We are talking today about the classic album by the band, Music from Big Pink. There it is. And
Yep.
you can see there on the back, that is the actual Big Pink house. Why is
Which
this so
is Dylan's
difficult?
house, right?
Well, okay, so I'll get to that whole story.
Okay.
But I don't know how much you know about the band, if you like the band at all. Tell me your familiarity. I'm just
Wait,
curious.
who?
The band.
The band? Wait, who? You're supposed to say yes, and I go, no, not them, the band. Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. It's a Tiny Toon or a Looney Tunes skit.
Very good.
Who? No, not the who, the band. Okay, yes, the band. No, I don't know very much.
Okay, cool. Well, if you'll indulge me, let me tell you my weird, convoluted story of how I got into the band. As you might have guessed, it was really because of Dylan. So,
Nope.
I'm a huge, massive Dylan fan, and I was just getting into Bob Dylan in when I was in college, and I went over to study in Scotland. While I was there, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do the shortcut way of getting into Dylan, and that is because back in the day, you had to buy all the individual CDs,
Yep.
expensive, took
Yep.
forever. So I thought, why don't I get a compilation? And I
Mhm.
picked up this three CD set called Masterpieces. As you can see, I paid £17 99 pence for it.
Yep.
This is a wacky collection, let me just tell you. So, if you look at the track list, you see, oh, it's got like a Rolling Stone, it's got, all these classic songs. Well, they're not the versions you want.
Gotcha.
This album is full of, so it was released as a promo compilation for Dylan's 1978 tour
Uh-huh.
of Japan, Australia, New Zealand. It's full of outtakes, live performances, weird stuff from the self-portrait sessions, which
Mhm.
I think you're familiar with self-portrait, right?
Yeah, that's the same era because they both have Dylan painted covers.
Correct. And this was in Dylan's career deconstruction era.
Right.
And the versions of these songs on this masterpiece, it's full of weird oddities. It's
Yeah.
so strange, but that was like I was attempting to get into Dylan and I ended up with that. Well, on that masterpieces 3 CD set, there are lots of tracks from the Basement Tapes.
Okay. Familiar with that one too. That's both of them, right? That's Dylan with the
That's
band.
Dylan with the band, correct. So to get into all this, was the strangest, like you hear these bass and they're really demos is what they are, the Basement Tapes. It was never meant for like a wide release. It
Yep.
was one of the original bootleg albums, Great White Wonder. Um, People got a hold of it before Dylan officially released it in the mid 70s. But just to kind of take it all the way back to what led up to this period, because of course Music from Big Pink released in 1968. We have to go back. If you look at the history of the band, so most of them are Canadian, with one exception.
Right. Right.
Do you know who that is?
I don't. Is Robbie Robertson the American or is it Levon Helm or
Levon Helm is from
okay.
Arkansas near the Mississippi River.
Kind of
And
makes sense.
the other four guys are from Canada, which
Okay.
makes for a really interesting blend. And they started as the backing band for Ronnie Hawkins, who I
Right.
understand was like a rockabilly performer.
Yep. I didn't actually come across that, but yeah, that's why they were the Hawks, right?
The Hawks, that's correct. And
So
so Dylan was looking for a band to back him up on his big tour. So he had released Highway 61, Blonde on Blonde, just incredible, you know, cosmically, revered albums. He went out on this tour because he was going electric. This whole lore
right,
about
right.
Dylan going electric. Well, he wanted a loud, fast band with him.
Hmm.
And so I don't totally understand how he connected with the Hawks, but that's what happened. And they got so much resistance and like
Yeah,
vitriol from the audience
right.
that my understanding is that Levon Helm couldn't handle it. And he's like,
Yep.
I'm out of here. So he
Yep.
went to go work on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yep.
Meanwhile, there was like a revolving door of drummers who all played very, very loudly. And the PA systems weren't up for the task. And it was just this, I mean, there was nothing like it in rock history of just, you know, animosity between the performer and the audience. Have you seen any of this footage or heard any
I
of it?
have a little. I think didn't you link me a long time ago to Idiot Wind, or what's that really, 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 really long one? Is that Idiot Wind?
So that's okay. Interesting. Idiot Wind is from that performance is from the 70s,
Okay.
which was on this masterpieces thing.
Okay.
They
So
didn't have
that's how
the
you
version
discovered
from
Idiot
Blonde on
Wind.
Blonde, or
Okay.
sorry, they didn't have the version from Blood on the Tracks. They had the live version that's like 12 minutes long. Anyway, getting into all this stuff, I did it all the wrong way. But this, so the Judas concert was
Uh-huh.
on this. It's captured on this live 1966 Dylan CD, which is great. Not very pleasant to listen to.
What's that incredibly long performance? Like even longer than Idiot Wind. It has like 12 verses.
Oh, you talking about Desolation Row?
Maybe. I'm not sure. It's not like I watched a bunch of Dylan videos. This is all stuff you sent me in the past decade or so.
Well, and I promise I'll get to the band, but basically, so at these 1966 shows, you would have Dylan out there acoustic, but he wasn't singing "Blowing in the Wind." He wasn't singing protest songs like people wanted. He was doing all this surrealist, like Gates of Eden, like
Hmm.
poetry. You know, it just
Right.
blew people's minds, but they weren't these audiences. That wasn't what they wanted, and they
Was he doing a
certainly
lot
didn't.
of was he doing a lot of the times they are changing, or is that more in the folk era? That's
That's what people
distractingly in the
wanted
folk
him
era?
to do. People
Okay.
wanted him to be playing
Okay.
Times They Are Changing, and instead he
All right.
came out with, you know, his
Crazy
mid
stuff.
60s stuff.
Yeah.
And the second half, the audience really hated because that's when the band came out, the Hawks.
Right.
And that's when he just, I mean, there's so much tension when you listen to the music. And
Yeah.
there's even some footage on the Scorsese documentary, which is incredible. I don't know how much of it is like an invented moment, the whole Judas thing, but
Mhm.
someone in the audience shouts Judas.
Right.
It's this
Right.
classic rock and roll moment.
Yeah.
So Dylan and all of the band, with the exception of Levon Helm, have been through this crazy experience together. And this is where the story gets hazy because supposedly Dylan had this motorcycle accident.
Right. 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 Maybe true, maybe not true.
Maybe true,
So,
maybe not true. It could have been a metaphorical crash because if
yeah.
you watch the footage of him on that tour with the Hawks, he
He's losing it.
was he was losing it. He was in rough shape. He could
Yeah.
not have kept that up.
Yeah.
And so what he needed was some recuperation. He
Yeah.
needed like something new, reinvention. And so
Hmm.
that is what so then so the story goes, two or three of the guys from the band rented this house.
Uh-huh. Here it is. There you go. It's not
And
very big though. It's kind of normal size pink, but whatever.
pretty normal. It's in upstate New York near Woodstock. Keep in mind the
Right.
timing of all this. This is late
Yes.
60s. And they played in the basement and they did all these like old time covers. They
Yeah.
created the songs are like humorous,
Mhm.
they're off the cuff. It's it's the polar opposite of what Dylan was doing on Blonde
Yeah.
on Blonde.
Is Dylan on the record anywhere, or did he just write three of the songs?
So Dylan and the band are both on the basement tapes, which were
Right.
essentially the
Right.
demos. Then on this record, the three Dylan songs or Dylan co-writes,
Mhm.
he is not on the album at all. He only
Okay.
his
That's what I
only
thought.
his contribution was the songwriting and the cover.
The cover. So is the band on Self Portrait, Dylan's album at the time?
Sort of.
Sort of. Okay.
Self-Portrait is it's so strange. It's
It's
got
not considered a great album.
no, it's actually horrendous. They are on, my understanding is that the band are still accompanying him on the live tracks, and they do not sound
Yeah.
good on that
Yeah.
album.
Okay.
But basically, so so they get Levon to come back from the oil rig. He rejoins the band in New York with Dylan, and they're creating this new music. And the album that they created, Music from Big Pink, is known as one of the best albums of all time. It's known as a foundation of the roots rock genre,
Yeah.
or you might call it country soul.
Yeah.
One thing that occurred to me is that, do you know what other album came out in 1968 that is an interesting parallel?
Well, the only other real bands that get kind of in this, kind of rock arena, but they're doing, country or even country soul, I definitely saw that thrown around, is what Graham Parsons would have caused cosmic American music. So that would be Flying Burrito Brothers. And also, I'm going to go out on a limb and say The Dead during Working Man's Dead and American Beauty.
Hmm.
And that's
Well,
what Graham labeled cosmic American music.
that's
But
good.
also, you know,
I was going for Graham Parsons because Sweetheart of the Rodeo by the Byrds
yeah,
came
with
out
Graham.
in 1968 as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
pretty
that has
interesting.
old country covers too. Like I think the only one that I really picked up on is the Lefty Frizzell Long Black Veil,
Long Black Veil.
which is a really kind of dark, haunting song. And I know it from Johnny Cash's cover when he was with Rick Rubin. It was on 3 or 4. I didn't even bother to look it up, but it's one that's been covered a million times, and it's an interesting tune. I don't know what I think of the band's version. I mean, it's fine. But
Yeah.
Lefty Frizzell was a super iconic original early guy, like the guy that George Jones looked up to. So that
Mhm.
dates it.
Well, it's an interesting moment in music history because you had the explosion of creativity around the mid 60s. You
Mhm.
had Sergeant Pepper Pet Sounds, Blonde on
That's
Blonde, everything
psychedelic.
spiraling into being more and more complex. And all of a sudden, you had this sort of roots back to basics,
Same time, yeah.
which kind of, I guess, spiritually led to the Woodstock, concert, which was right there in their backyard.
Mhm.
It's kind of wild. And the band
Right.
play at Woodstock. So pretty interesting, pretty interesting time in music. I love things I love about this album. I love the organic instrumentation. I love the like mysterious sort of like biblical sounding music or
hmm
lyrics.
hmm
Um, I think Richard Manuel is an incredible vocalist, very ghostly.
hmm
What did you think of the vocals on this?
Some of the falsetto definitely towards the end gets me. I don't like it. It's so strained, but it does work in places. I don't know enough to pick out who's singing what. Who does the more of the country voice, the more of the
The
almost,
twang.
twangy voice? Yeah, is that Robbie Robertson or
That's Levon Helm. So he's
that's
singing
Levon
on,
Helm?
yeah, he's singing on the weight.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha. So
Robertson,
for him.
the three main singers are Levon Helm, who has
Mhm.
more, I mean, you can tell he's from Arkansas.
Yeah, he's my favorite.
Yeah, Richard Manuel is the acquired taste. His is
Oh yeah.
the haunting falsetto. And
Oof.
I think that's the barrier for the band. I think that
It
people who
is.
don't love the band, they can't get past
Yeah,
the Richard Manuel of it all.
I would agree. I even
And
told Sarah, I was like, listen to this. I mean, it's grating. I
but
get
you
it.
have to understand, I got this wanting the classic Dylan recordings, and I heard Richard Manuel.
Yeah.
And it took
Well,
me a really long time to love Richard Manuel.
yeah. Yeah.
But
Well,
at a certain point, it just flipped for me?
yeah. I get it. There to me, his voice does have some elements of Graham.
Hmm.
There's some Graham Parsons songs. I'm not gonna say if they're Flying Burrito Brothers, The Birds, or solo, but like our song, there is that real like thin vocal, and it sounds like he could just break at any moment, and they probably just would have kept going. Like he has that. People will say that Graham Parsons has that real, you know, I don't know. I can only describe it as an emo element to his
Hey,
voice. It sounds really tender and soft and I mean, he didn't even make it to the 27 club. He was in the 26 club. So, guy had a lot of problems, but
well, there's a lot of pathos in the voice. I think.
yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a very human voice. And I hear that in Richard Manuel, but
Mhm.
it is a lot. It is a lot.
So, what do you think of? a song like Caledonia Mission. So that's like a hard hitting funk. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
I was not expecting something like that out of this
I,
band.
I like that one. I've got a few notes here, and yeah, it was kind of a ballady one. Uh, I wrote lilty vocals. Is that a Richard Manuel?
Gotta be.
Yeah, that's like probably the first one he really sings on. No,
I think he's on
right.
the first couple. Yeah, the only other vocalist is oh shoot, what's his name?
Isn't it Robbie?
Bassist, Rick Danko,
So Robbie Robertson is just the guitarist.
and songwriter.
Okay, I don't know anything about the band. I'm winging
But
it.
you liked Chest Fever.
Chest Fever was good. Caledonia Mission, I don't have it playing in my head right now, but Chest Fever was probably my favorite.
Okay.
Uh, I like the organ in it. I like the funkiness to it. There's some good organ all over this, and then it's got a very sermon-esque like Iron Butterfly, like In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida feel, like bam bam bam. I mean, that's the first two notes of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, obviously, I don't know who came
That's
out
a
first.
good point. You're right.
I made it as I said the notes, so I may not be a musical genius, but I sometimes hear things and I'm like, nope, that's that.
Well, and you hear something like The Weight, and it
Yeah,
sounds like a
okay.
song. I mean, we've heard it so many times it's hard to even
Easy
like
Rider, which I think you
Easy
introduced
Rider.
me to. That's kind of the most famous part. I think they get out on the bikes and
Hmm.
they let that go on the soundtrack probably like almost 2 minutes. And it
Hmm.
is a super iconic part. And I had that soundtrack forever, but then I eventually was like, what do I need Steppenwolf for? So that's $1 record. But
I think what finally made me love the band was you hear a song like that, and
yeah,
it sounds like it's older than The Hills. You know what I mean?
yes, yes.
Somehow they've created these new songs. Maybe it's because they're mixed in with something like Long Black Veil, but like
Hmm.
The Weight feels like a song from another century.
It does. They're only like comparable to I mean CCR or
Hmm.
almost a bluegrass. Like with that song, there's no Graham Parsons comparison or Dead. I mean, I know Jerry Garcia was a bluegrass guy and he started on banjo, but they sound like CCR. They really got that not just twang, they got that old timey that like the Stanley Brothers or whatever, the O
Yeah,
Brother.
and
Okay.
the music is not in any hurry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it feels like a bunch of guys in a basement.
Yep, yep. And
From
I never knew if it was take a load off Annie or take a load off Fanny. But I
Same.
guess it's Fanny. But
Yeah.
I always sung Annie because the off, the F just trails into it. But
Yeah.
okay, Fanny. I mean, it's kind of British, I guess.
So, talking about this music that feels like it's from another century, I think that the band really doubled down on that feeling on their next album, which is the self-titled.
Mhm.
This actually was the first band album that I truly loved. Um, to me, it gets even more into that old weird Americana thing.
Right.
Um, I still don't know which of the two I love more. But you listen to a song on this album like Rockin' Chair that I don't know, I can't explain it. I don't know any other band like the band that could pull something like this off. Um, but I didn't get into Big Pink fully until you sent it to me on vinyl.
Mhm.
When I listened to it on vinyl, something clicked for me. I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I get it. I see it. I just think it captures this moment in 1968 in rock history that, it was foundational.
Right. Why is there an elephant on that cover?
You'd have to ask Bob Dylan.
Why is
Um,
there an elephant in the room?
so continuing the show and tell,
Uh-huh.
um, Dylan, of course, came out with John Wesley Harding in this
Yeah.
era. Minimalist, weird, biblical sounding,
Mhm.
total, change of direction from his trajectory. So that was a big influence on Dylan. Dylan went on to reunite with the band on the album Planet Waves, which is actually a pretty big seller. I don't
Right.
know, like the band was a really big deal in the mid 70s,
Yeah.
which you can tell because
Sissy?
do you know what happened in 1976 with the band?
Is that the last waltz?
The Last Waltz.
Okay.
And that was basically they could tell that they were sort of past their peak,
Hmm.
and they did what few artists do. They called it a day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's certainly not something that bands do anymore.
And of course, the members of the band went on to have very interesting careers.
Mhm.
Um, Robbie Robertson for sure has been done a million things. He just won, I believe he just won an Oscar for this year. And he's posthumous, of course.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't he die a few years ago?
Yeah. So I think it was pretty recently, actually. But I look at this album. So what makes this album great? I look at the influence it's had. I think about bands like the Jayhawks, Whiskey
Sure.
Town,
Yeah,
Ryan
yeah.
Adams, even like Sufjan Stevens.
Hmm.
There's this sort of this connection across the decades that I think only started because these guys were holed up in a basement in
Hmm.
upstate New York.
Yeah, I think with, there's not a lot of bands anymore that do, I'm gonna just call it Americana because it really gets thrown into that nowadays. And that usually, like Starte, the record label, was a real Americana label, and it always said, country, and it said bluegrass, gospel, and they stuck to that. And they were one of the few labels in the 50s and the 60s. But yeah, I mean, it is really lumped together now. There is another really important label that, well, I think actually, you know what? I think I was going to mention CBGBs because most people don't know this, but CBGBs is country, bluegrass, blues. And that again, Americana, because Hilly Crystal, the owner, he loved Americana. So there's this genre of music of many genres, and it's not done often anymore. And it's essentially Americana. And I think that's fine to call it that. I mean, do you like that term or do you hate that term?
Oh, I think it's fine. I just to me
It's not
it
it doesn't really describe, specifically at all. It's just this blanket genre because I guess not many people do it anymore. Like with the band, the thing I think of the most is CCR.
okay.
And I don't know much about CCR, but what I believe they are is four white dudes from Oakland, from the Bay Area, performing roots Americana music, whatever you want to call it, with the swampy theme, and th're not from New Orleans. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on there? I mean, at least I think the Levon, is it Levon or Levon Helm?
Levon Helm.
I got him as like a drag queen, Levon Helm. But okay, Levon Helm. Levon Helm, I think, is the most authentic part of the band for me, and he's the one American.
Well,
So
yeah, that's what kind of makes it weird to call it Americana, is to me it has this sort of ghostly, mysterious Canadian vibe to it,
sure,
with a little bit of the Levon influence that gives it that sort of grounding in US music.
yeah.
Um,
But
I
were
don't
they big
know.
in Canada or they were bigger in America, right?
I'm not really sure. I
That's
don't,
an interesting discussion right there.
they're kind of a strange case. They sort of were a little under the radar, well respected,
Mhm.
and then they blew up big in the 70s, and then that was it.
Hmm.
They called it quits and had this
How
incredible.
many how many albums did they only put out? Like two, those two, or a couple more like not so great ones, or what's going on with their catalog?
There are
Let's
a
get
couple
into the
more.
discography.
Yeah, I've got that. You sent me another one, Stage Fright.
Oh yeah, yeah. I should know this. There's a live one with the rainbow cover.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I think they have 4 or 5 studio albums, but these two in particular,
Yeah, those are the two. But
yeah, those are the two. So
okay.
tell me, as we're wrapping up here, Casey, tell me, have I convinced you that this is an important album, or do you just not get it?
Is it supposed to be convince me if I liked it or if it's an important album? Because it's easy to say it's an important album. I mean, it does. I don't know if I'll be listening to it often. I really, really, truly do like Chest Fever. That one really hits for me. It almost fits in that vibe of the San Francisco sound, which
Uh-huh.
the bands I like from that are Blue Cheer. Not really Jefferson Airplane, not really Quicksilver Messenger Service. I like Love a lot. Some Grateful Dead. I'm really choosy, but Janis Joplin, Big Brother, not really much. But that's San Francisco psych sound, which is obviously really important. They don't really quite fit into that either.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah,
But that one song does. It's Iron Butterfly, or if you want to go SF, Blue Cheer. you
Well,
know?
you're right. You're right. Chest Fever does sound sort of Jefferson Airplane-esque.
Yeah, it has a lot of those elements. Um, but yeah, I guess I prefer the Dylan ones. I mean, the weight is great, but it really does sound like it is so old timey. It has a modern sound to it, but I mean, I probably heard that song most of my life and thought it was at least 10, 15 years before it actually came out, you know.
Yeah.
But you can hear on the production.
Mhm.
I've been thinking this whole episode about what the Ronnie Hawkins song is. I guess because the Hawk's the guy's dad. Because I know rockabilly pretty well, and I know that Ronnie Hawkins was on Checker, which is a Chess subsidiary. They had a few rockabilly artists, so that's Chicago. But I cannot, for the life of me, think of his hit. It is rockabilly, and I don't know why I can't think of it. So that's really annoying.
Well, someone will tell us in the comments.
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Pipe in. I like
So,
that they were called the Honkies or the Crackers.
yeah.
I find that pretty hilarious. I could see how that could happen. But yeah, I don't really have much else that I need to add. I would say that you convinced me that it is a better album than I thought. But going forward, I doubt if I'll be spending a lot of time on it. If I wanted that roots Americana sound from the late 60s or whatever, 67, I'd probably go here. But it has that perfect feel in Easy Rider. I'll say that.
Hmm.
And the weight is, I mean, what is it like? You know the Rolling Stones list. Is it like 38th best song of all time or something? I mean, it's a good
Well,
song. It
yeah.
stands out.
Classic in every way.
It is. And on that note, I guess I'd say I'm slightly more convinced. I have our next podcast pick by me. So this is actually, I'm going to give some clues first before I show it. This is actually the follow-up to the 1989 seminal proto nu metal classic, many other things. You probably think I'm about to show you like a Limp Bizkit album or something, but what it is an album I don't believe you know, and it will follow up rather nicely to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. One of my favorites from the 90s, an unsung gem, Faith No More's 1992
Ah, cool.
Angel Dust.
Sweet.
Absolutely 100% stone cold mega classic.
So are we gonna put this up against the Chili Peppers and see which one comes out on top?
Oh yeah, I gotta research and get back into the Mike Patton and RHCP feud. And also, you do not know this album, correct? Like you've never heard it.
I mean,
There's
maybe a
no
couple
epic.
of
There's
songs.
no epic on it. That was the 89 album. That was the real thing.
Does it have Midlife Crisis?
I believe so. Yeah. Yep. So you have
Okay.
heard some of it.
Some of it, but I'm
Yeah, that's
excited. This
track
is
three.
good.
I don't know the tracks super well, but yeah, that's track three. And
Cool.
that's a good one.
Sweet.
Okay. Get
Looking
into it
forward
next.
to it.
Okay.
Bye.